Have you ever had a great idea for a business, but when you start doing the math and looking at all the stuff that you're going to need to get or the software you're going to need to develop, and it just seems so overwhelming that maybe you don't feel like it's even possible for you to do? Well, maybe there's a way. That's what we're going to talk about on today's episode. I'm Steve Reed, and this is Brand or Die. So after all these years, I finally got a truck again. I live in Texas, and you just got to have a truck. And when everyone around me is getting trucks, and then my nephew gets a truck, I'm like, okay, that's the bottom line. I got to get a truck now. And one of my favorite things about having a vehicle today is that you can order mobile oil change service to come to your house and take care of all that for you. Well, I've been doing that, but in this case, I had a battery that was going bad on my new truck. And, I figured, well, that battery may be about 2, 3 years old, but it was still in warranty. So they were able to replace it for free. Anyway, I get talking with the guy who's come to help me with my battery. And it turns out he brought the wrong battery. The wrong battery was given to him. Wasn't necessarily his fault. Maybe he should have checked it. I don't know. But we were sitting there for probably about a good half hour while someone ran another battery over. And we just got talking about his life. And one of the things he told me is he suggested that he was interested in starting his own business doing mobile oil changes. But he pointed over to the van and he goes, it's just going to be too much, right? He goes, I've done all the math. I've calculated the cost of the van, the cost of the oil pump, the cost of all these different things. And it's just going to be really, really expensive. And I don't see how it's going to be possible for me to start that business, right? And he also mentioned he worked 6 days a week. So he works on Saturday as well. He just likes to work. He likes to do the job. And he doesn't have to work that much, but he enjoys it. It brings in a lot of revenue for him and he's happy about it. And so we started talking about this. And this is a very interesting kind of conundrum that I encounter with other people from time to time. And so what I asked him was, I said, okay, well, let me ask you a question here. Can you change oil without a truck? Like, what's the minimum that you would need to actually change the oil in a vehicle? And he said, oh, I just need something to catch the oil in. I go buy the oil and then maybe like a wrench, a couple tools, things like that. And he's like, it's pretty easy to do. And I said, okay. And I was like, well, how long does it take you to change the oil? Like just with that base stuff, like you just have that minimal stuff. Like how long would it take you to do an oil change? He says, oh, it'll take me about this much time. And I said, okay, well, how long does it take you to change your oil with your van over there? And he goes, it takes me about this amount of time. And I said, we were just doing the math real quick. And I was like, oh, it's about 8 minutes difference. It's like, the van's not really saving you a ton of time, number one. And number two, don't actually need the van. And that's what we kind of got down to. You can see the lights going off in his head. And I said, what if you just picked one day a week, you talk to some friends, you talk to some people and say, hey, I'm going to be doing oil changes. I'll come by your house. I'll change your oil. I'll take care of it. And you just pay me for my service. Be good to go. Reach out to some friends, some neighbors, some people that you know, maybe just everyone in your neighborhood, just kind of let them know and say, this is the day I'm doing it on. And you take one day away from what you're doing now professionally, and you do that personally. And obviously you want to make sure, you're not competing with anyone else. Make sure there are no vehicles that particular company would service, and you simply provide that service. You're just changing your oil. You're not using the company equipment. You're just taking your own vehicle with your supplies and you're performing the oil change. Now, obviously the van brings you convenience. Obviously it allows you to work faster, but how many clients do you think you could potentially build up on your own doing it the manual way? And you could just see the lights going off in his head. And at that moment, this dream that he had that seemed like it was way out of his reach, all of a sudden seemed like it was right in his reach. And what I did is I told him a story of another business owner. And this individual, he started a company called Todooz, TDOOZ. And what they're doing is they're kind of like a DoorDash for home services. And the way he told me he started the business was now they have a really cool app. They built out this amazing app. Before that, it was a web app. And before that, just to get it started, he called around to people and said, hey, I'm starting this new service where I can take care of X, Y, and Z for you. You don't even have to worry about the companies. I have that all figured out. I have the contacts. What services do you need done that you'd be willing to outsource to me? And I just make sure they get done. And so he racked up a number of people doing the service. He was essentially the app. He was doing all the work himself. And what's interesting about that is I remember reading a story about another guy who did something very simple. And I wasn't planning on talking about this one, but it just popped in my head to where it was like some type of email service. And he was doing everything through email, same type of thing. He became the app to prove the concept. Now, it's been a while since I've brought up this term, but it's called RAT, Riskiest Assumption Test. And you have to apologize. I can't remember off the top of my head the guy who came up with this term, but you look it up, Riskiest Assumption Test, RAT, Google him, you'll find him. And the whole idea is whenever we go to start a business, we are making assumptions, right? And these assumptions are risky. So you ask yourself, what is the riskiest assumption I'm making with this business? And then you develop a way to then prove whether that assumption is as risky as you think it is, or if it's doable. And I had somebody come to me with this idea, and they wanted to start a company selling ukuleles online through Amazon. But they noticed all the ukuleles were just kind of just the regular standard wood ones, the real cheap ones. And he's like, I think I see a space where people might be willing to pay more for a higher quality ukulele, maybe with really cool colors on it, really awesome that kids would get into and everything. And so that was his assumption. So we started talking about that. We said, okay, and I asked him, I was like, what is your riskiest assumption? And he was able to figure out, well, it would be that somebody would choose to buy my more expensive, cooler looking ukulele versus the cheap wood $30 ones. And so he started thinking about it. Well, who's buying these? Like kids. Kids are like, I want an ukulele. And they may do it and they may play it. And a lot of kids are going to be like, I'm done with this. Move on to the next thing. And so parents might not want to spend a lot of money on that if it's real risky for them they're not going to want to spend a lot of money getting the kid into something if they're not going to stick with it. If they stick with it and they're doing better and they want a better instrument, it's easy to justify at that point. So anyway, we started thinking about it, and I kind of posed this question to him. I said, look, I could take your money. I could build the website. I could build the brand. I could do all that for you. But what if this isn't the right idea, right? You haven't proven your riskiest assumption yet. How could you go about doing that? And we brainstormed a little bit, and he came to the idea, like, well, I'm going to put a survey out. I'm just going to survey a bunch of people and ask them a series of questions. So he does that. And he comes back to me and he just says, okay, look, I'm glad I did this because based on the data that I found, this would not be the right thing to do. Like, this would not be the business I want to get into. And so he went his way for a while, and it's like, wow, I could have lost out on a high paying client, right? I could have just designed stuff for him, built his dream, and then if it failed, it was on him. But I don't think that's really the ethical thing to do. If I'm going to work on a project for a client, at least for me, I want to make sure they've at least thought through the process. A lot of people do. They come to me with data, information, really, really good stuff that shows that they've done their homework. And then now when we work together, there's a high degree of probability of success because we've all put work into what we're doing and it's the right thing to do. And, even then, businesses don't work out. So it's not always guaranteed, but higher chance of success if you've taken a couple of initial steps. So anyway, this same client, he came back to me like 2 months later. I didn't hear from him for a while. And he comes back to me, goes, "Hey, I've done some more digging. I've done some more surveying. I've done some more research." And he goes, "I found the business I want to build." And he shared it with me. And it was like, "All right, let's do this." And we forged ahead on that one instead. But that opportunity saved him from potentially making a very costly mistake that he didn't have to. Same thing with this individual who came to me and was wanting to start his own oil change business. What's the worst that could happen if he goes around asking if anyone wants their oil change? Now, I guarantee you, he changes his own oil, his vehicles. He's got all the tools that he needs to already start his business doing mobile oil changes. And one of the things we discussed is, do you really think people care that there isn't some big van? No. Do most people stand outside and watch you while you change your oil? And if they did, do they know what an oil change person should have to do it? No, most people don't. They don't care. And if they do, then they're probably not your clients anyway. And so you have everything you need to get started and do this business. And you could probably rack up a ton of clients and be able to have them on a schedule and then slowly wean your way off of the other business while you're making the other business grow. And then you put away money, you save, you save, you save until you go, okay, well, what's the next piece of equipment that I could buy that would make my job either faster, more efficient, or deliver more value? We talked about even just taking the core concept and saying, well, let's have your base model, which is just the oil change, but then let's have another service, a VIP service, where you change all the fluids, you air up the tires, you clean the windshield, you just take a squeegee with some soapy water, clean the windshield so people come out and it's like, oh, wow, all the bugs are gone. And wow, my car feels fresher and everything. And so we talked about all those different things he could add in. They don't really take a lot of time. They don't add a lot of expense, but add more value to where you could potentially charge more. And we started doing the math on some of that. It was really interesting what we came out with. And so I think the lesson here is to focus on the principle, not necessarily copying or imitating what we're doing here. Like, obviously, I'm not going to be able to solve everybody's business problems, nor could I, but principles are universally applicable. Anyone who's going to start a business can ask themselves, is there a way I could test my riskiest assumption without a massive cost and a massive investment of time or resources? And you'll find that in many, many cases, you can do something. You don't necessarily have to build the end result. You look at some of the people that have built massive businesses today, like Amazon or SpaceX or Tesla. I'm counting Elon for two of those, but they didn't start doing the big thing. They started smaller, right? Especially Jeff Bezos, the way he started his company. He started very small and he scaled it out to what it is today because new opportunities presented themselves. And now Amazon is in a place today where he probably never imagined it would be. I don't know that anyone could have conceived at how big and pervasive Amazon has gotten into things, and to where you can order things and get them the very same day, which still kind of blows my mind, the logistics those guys are working with. It's crazy. But anyway, that's the main takeaway. I think that's the lesson you want to learn from everything that's been presented here today, is there's always a way to start. You just have to think, not necessarily smaller, but strip away everything else and ask yourself, how can I test my riskiest assumption? I mean, first, what is my riskiest assumption? And then find a way to test it. And once you've tested that, think, how can I implement the most minimum viable product or version of this that I can? Maybe it starts as a service using your own power, your own steam, and going from there. So those are the things to focus on. So think about that. If you're in a place where you feel like you've always wanted to start something, but you have all these mental obstacles and even physical obstacles in the way, bring it back down. look at the core elements of it, and I guarantee you'll find some kind of way of being able to at least kick things off or start them in the right direction. Even if you gather enough data to then build a business plan around it and then take it to an investor and say, hey, look what I found. I don't have the capital to start this. I'm looking for an investment partner who'd be willing to fund this initiative so that, we can turn this into a real business. Hopefully you learned something from that. If you've had experience with this before, I'd love for you to share in the comments below your own experience with maybe doing something similar. Or if you happen to take the principles that were shared here in today's video and went out and implement them, dude, post your wins down below. That would be awesome to share with everybody else. Anyway, thanks for joining me on this episode of Brand or Die, and we'll see you next time.